One day, Geppetto, who earned his living making puppets for traveling theatres, started to carve a puppet out of a piece of wood from a tree which had blown down in a gale. It was very easy to carve that special piece of wood, and as he happily worked away, he pictured in his mind the sort of son he would like to have. Miraculously, the puppet he created was the exact image of the son he longed for. Geppetto was amazed. "He looks just like the son of my dreams," he cried. "What lovely rosy cheeks he has." Suddenly, the puppet seemed to move. That was not possible. But it was. Before Geppetto could stop him, the puppet ran into the street and started jumping over anything that got in his way. People in the street looked on in astonishment as Geppetto ran after the puppet, calling, "Come here, Pinocchio, do as you're told." He called the puppet Pinocchio, as that had always been his favorite name. When he caught up with the boy, Geppetto hugged him and called him son. Then, as Pinocchio seemed to be always moving around, Geppetto decided to tighten all his nuts and bolts so that he would not fall apart. That was not very pleasant for the little one, and when Geppetto started to tighten the joints in his neck, he called out, "Be careful, Daddy, you're hurting me." "It's a miracle," exclaimed Geppetto. "He speaks just like a real child." Afterwards, he dressed the boy in smart red shorts and a blue shirt. He would have to make sure that Pinocchio received a good education so that he would grow up to be successful. The next day, Geppetto sold his only winter coat so that he could buy all the books and pencils Pinocchio needed to take to school. "Be a good boy at school," said Geppetto as he kissed the boy goodbye. On the way to school, Pinocchio met two naughty boys who, on seeing his brand new books, offered to buy them from him. Pinocchio readily agreed, and with the money, he bought a ticket to see a show at a nearby theater. The show began. Several puppets, dressed in a variety of costumes, came on stage and danced. In his enthusiasm, Pinocchio leaped up to join them and started dancing too. The audience loved it and clapped wildly, showering him with coins. Noting how popular he was, the owner of the theater gave Pinocchio 3 gold coins on condition that he performed every day. Geppetto would be very disappointed if he knew what Pinocchio was doing. The boy was not turning out as he had hoped. Worse was to follow, because after leaving the theater, Pinocchio did not go home. Instead, he wandered around, marveling at all the sights, but soon night began to fall. Suddenly, 2 scoundrels, a fox who passed himself off as a cripple and a cat who pretended to be blind, approached the puppet and started to ask him questions. Pinocchio boasted that he was a dancer in the theater and that he had 3 gold coins. He even showed them the money so they would not think he was making it up. The 2 rascals continued talking to Pinocchio, and soon they had convinced him not to trust the theater owner, saying that they knew him well, and although he had been generous that day in order to gain Pinocchio's confidence, he would soon stop paying him. "Come with us," said the fox. "You'll not only have a good time, but we'll make you rich as well." "And famous," added the cat. They even invited him to dinner. Pinocchio willingly followed the 2 rogues. The dinner was splendid, but when it was finished, the 2 villains cunningly escaped through a window and left poor Pinocchio to pay for the banquet with 1 of his gold coins. He had had the first important lesson of his life, but would he learn from it? Remembering his good father, he decided to return home. The night was very dark, so he was a little frightened when he saw 2 figures approaching. The figures had blankets over their heads with small holes cut at eye level. An owl, who had been snoozing on a branch of a nearby tree, started screeching. The wise owl had guessed what was about to happen, and was trying to warn the little puppet. But as it feared, the figures robbed him of everything he had. The hooded figures turned out to be the two rogues who had tricked Pinocchio before. This time they tied him up and left him hanging upside down from the branch of a tree. Luckily for Pinocchio, the owl took pity on him and with great difficulty managed to free him. This was very good of the owl, as normally owls are shy creatures and keep away from strangers. It then carried Pinocchio to its home in the nearby tree. The blue fairy, who only appeared in times of trouble, was waiting for Pinocchio when he arrived at the owl's home. She began asking him questions, but Pinocchio, trying to sound important, answered her with lies. With each lie, his nose grew a little longer until it was enormous. But as the blue fairy listened to him, she realized that Pinocchio had forgotten all about his father and had not even considered how worried he would be. She interrupted the puppet. "I know that you are telling lies," she said angrily. "I can see everything and know everything. At this very moment, your good father is risking his life searching for you along the cliffs." At last, Pinocchio realized the error of his ways and promised that he would be good in future. He even cried a little. The fairy forgave him, and with a sweep of her wand, she changed his nose back to its proper size. She told him to go at once in search of Geppetto, and he promised to do just that. The owl and the other birds showed their delight by chirping merrily. But did Pinocchio really mean what he said? He did at the time, but all his good intentions came to nothing when he was spotted by a street urchin. Pinocchio refused to go along with him, but in the end he had no choice. "Hurry up," said the street urchin. "The stagecoach to Fun City will be passing soon. You will really enjoy it there." When the stagecoach arrived, it was full of naughty, lazy boys, and with much pushing, Pinocchio and his new friend managed to climb aboard. Pinocchio was astonished when he noticed the ears of some of the boys. They were very, very long. Then, to his dismay, he realized that his own ears were growing, and he was beginning to look like a donkey. Pinocchio decided that it would be a good idea to escape from a city where little boys turn into donkeys, so that unscrupulous men could parade them at fairs for people to make fun of. Luckily for him, as he was trying to escape, his friend, the owl, appeared and saved him. As they were flying away, the owl told Pinocchio that Geppetto had gone out to sea in a boat in search of his new son, and that an enormous whale had swallowed him. For the first time, Pinocchio realized just how badly he had behaved towards his father, and how much he loved him. Eager to save him, Pinocchio jumped onto a boat. How difficult it was to make progress as the huge waves threatened to capsize the boat. The sea became more choppy, and eventually the fragile boat was engulfed by water. The enormous whale that had swallowed Geppetto was lurking nearby, and quickly swallowed Pinocchio as well. Pinocchio could not believe his eyes, for there was Geppetto sitting in his boat. Overjoyed, he threw himself into his father's arms. Realizing that Geppetto was very weak, Pinocchio vowed to save him at all costs. Luckily, the light from the boat's lantern enabled him to search for something to help them escape. As it swallowed, just about everything got in its way. There were many strange things in the whale's stomach. Pinocchio picked up an oar and tickled the whale's throat with it. This made the monster cough loudly, and as it did so, Pinocchio grabbed his father, and they both shot out the whale's mouth. Pinocchio tried to carry Geppetto to the surface, but he was too heavy. They were both getting weaker by the minute, and Pinocchio was afraid that they were going to drown. Suddenly, a dolphin appeared, and sent them flying up to the surface, and they drifted onto a sandy beach. Oh no! His father was not breathing, and Pinocchio burst into tears, blaming himself for his death. But help was at hand, for at that moment the blue fairy came flying through the air, and smiling at the little puppet, touched the old man with her magic wand. Geppetto opened his eyes, and so the great love he had for his son was rewarded. After restoring Geppetto to life, the blue fairy touched the puppet with her magic wand and changed him into a real boy. Now the good man really had a proper son, the most loving that ever lived, and they both lived happily ever after. The end.